Virgo, the universe will show you a scene you will never forget. Have you ever had the feeling that something was trying to warn you about something and you didn't stop to listen? It's not a clear sign. It's that detail that's too small to be a coincidence, too big to ignore. What if I told you that there's a specific scene stored somewhere in your near future that will make you stop in the middle of the street and think, now I understand everything? You, Virgo, have a characteristic that almost no one names correctly. It's not perfectionism. Perfectionism is the name others give it because it's easier to understand. What you really do is measure time in a way that no one else does. You're like a sundial on a cloudy day, still working, still trying to capture the light that isn't bright enough for anyone else to notice, but bright enough for you to suspect it exists. While the other signs wait for the sun to fully appear, you're already calculating the shadow it will cast when it finally does. This puts you in a strange place. You sense things before they happen, but you don't trust what you feel until you have proof. And that's exactly where the universe begins to prepare you for the scene that's yet to come, because it knows you won't believe anything you can't examine closely. There's a part of you that functions like a dark room in an analog photograph. You don't develop the image as soon as it arrives. You preserve the moment, the feeling, the face of the person who said that phrase that hurt or healed, and you take all of that into a dark room where no one else enters. There, alone, you wait. You let the chemical fluid of your mind work slowly. And only when the image begins to appear on the paper, line by line, shadow by shadow, do you allow it to be real. Why do you do this? Why don't you just reveal it right away, like everyone else does? Because once, a long time ago, you revealed it too quickly, and the image came out blurry. You trusted before examining it, and it hurt in a way you vowed never to feel again. But there's a problem with that. While you store everything in the darkroom, waiting for the perfect moment to develop it, some images rot in there. They never come out, and you carry around negatives that never became photographs just because you were afraid the right light wouldn't come. Now pay attention to this. You also have a garden inside you, but nobody can see it. It's small, tended to with almost religious care, and each branch has been pruned by you over the years so that nothing grows outside the shape you consider acceptable. You are the gardener and the tree at the same time. You prune parts of yourself that you consider unnecessary, excessive, embarrassing, and the result is a version of yourself so well carved that people admire it from afar without imagining how many cuts were made to get there. The problem with pruning a bonsai is that it never grows freely. It grows exactly to the size the shears allowed. And sometimes, Virgo, you wonder very quietly, when no one is listening, what would I have become if no one, not even me, had cut anything? This question is unsettling, and it should be, because it is from this question, precisely this one, that the scene unfolding before you is born. There's also a third space within Virgo, more hidden than the other two. It's like a cellar built beneath the house, in the dark, storing everything you've decided you're not yet ready to feel. And there's a specific barrel in there, stored longer than anyone else, that's about to, it will open up on its own, without your consent, at the very moment when you are least prepared. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose doesn't come as just another generic self-help promise. It comes as a mental attitude, that of stopping demanding a perfection from yourself that even the universe doesn't ask for. For those who carry entire cellars of stored-up feelings, waiting for the right moment to open each barrel, this material acts as a key that doesn't force the door. It simply shows that you can already enter without needing another year of waiting, without needing another pruning, without needing to reveal the image only when it's too perfect to hurt. Perhaps you're exactly at that point right now. Still trying to understand what you've felt in the last few minutes, with that active, unsettling discomfort trying to turn into clarity within you. This is the time to act, not to keep that feeling tucked away in another barrel, waiting for an ideal year that may never come, because the clarity you seek doesn't mature on its own in the dark. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And tell me in the comments below, which barrel do you most avoid opening? The one you know is ready, but you haven't yet had the courage to open. And the barrel that opens on its own holds no grudge. It holds a question you buried years ago. What if the pruned version of yourself was never the right version? The whole cellar trembles with this, because it's not about what you feel, it's about what you decided not to feel just to keep functioning. You learned this very early on. Someone at some point in your life needed you to be the stable part of the story, and you accepted it because it seemed safer to be useful than to be whole. But a part of you remained observing from afar, like someone looking at the sky through an old telescope. You saw stars that no longer existed, lights that took years to reach you, and yet you kept adjusting the lenses, trying to see something that always seemed a little out of focus. This telescope is the part of you that never stopped observing others to understand what was expected of it. While everyone else was living, you were calculating. While everyone else was feeling, you were calibrating the lens so as not to misjudge the distance between what you felt and what you could show. And this worked for a long time, until you realized that you were seeing other people's lives more clearly than your own. Why would anyone trade their own clarity for someone else's? Because it's easier to point the telescope outward. It's safer to understand someone else's universe than to admit that your own sky has been cloudy for years. And it is precisely at this point that the scene begins to take shape, because the universe doesn't send obvious signals to those who already know how to interpret everything. It waits for the moment when Virgo finally turns the telescope inward. And when that happens, what she sees has nothing to do with distant stars. It has to do with a light that has always been there, too close to be noticed. Think about this. How many times have you been able to explain exactly what was happening in someone's life, even before that person realized it? You saw their patterns before they saw them themselves. You knew what was going to hurt, what was going to work out, what was still going to take a long time to resolve. And at the same time, when someone asked you how you were, the answer came out automatically rehearsed, a ready-made phrase that served as a curtain so you didn't have to look inside that telescope pointed the wrong way. This has a simple, albeit painful, explanation. It's safer to decipher someone else's world than to admit that your own remains, in parts, a mystery even to yourself. Seeing others clearly gives you a sense of control. Seeing yourself requires standing still, without any lens to mediate, just you and the raw image. And Virgo, among all the signs, is the one that fears the raw image the most, because it doesn't come with instructions on how to fix what appears. But there's a difference between a broken telescope and a telescope that's never been pointed in the right place. Yours isn't broken. It's just been waiting for years for you to have the courage to tilt the tube a few degrees inwards and let the first clear image of your own life finally appear. That light that has always been too close to be noticed has a name, and perhaps you still don't have the courage to say that name aloud. That's why so many Virgos spend their time pointing their telescopes outward, understanding the whole world, but not themselves. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose exists precisely to turn that lens inward. It doesn't give you ready-made answers. It gives you back the right instrument to see what has always been there, too close, too obvious to be seen. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There's another part of Virgo that functions like an old weaving loom. the kind that sits in a quiet corner of the house with threads stretched from end to end, waiting to be crossed one by one. You weave your life like that, thread by thread, decision by decision, without skipping a single step, because you know that a knot out of place compromises the entire design. People see the finished fabric and think it was born that way. They don't notice the hours spent sitting there, redoing the same section 3-4 times, because the color wasn't exactly right. The problem with weaving like this is that you've never learned to make a mistake and keep going. For you, a mistake on the loom isn't a detail. It's a stain that will always be visible, right in the middle of the design, and everyone will see it. So you undo it, redo it, undo it again. And meanwhile, time passes, and the fabric that could have been finished months ago remains there, half-finished, because the part of you that demands perfection won't let you simply continue weaving with the imperfection included. But there's a detail that the great weavers know and that no one has ever told you. The most valuable carpets in the world, the ones that span generations, always have one thread that's intentionally wrong. A signed mistake. Proof that it was made by human hands, not by a perfect machine. And what if the scene unfolding before you is exactly that? Proof that your wrong thread has always been the most valuable part of the entire fabric. Think about how many times you've ruined a friendship, a project, a version of yourself, just because a thread deviated from the pattern you had imagined. You never learned that you could weave around the mistake, incorporating it into the design, letting the imperfection become part of the relief. You did learn, however, that mistakes can be undone, that they can be remade as many times as necessary, until all evidence that an insecure hand passed through there disappears. And the result is a loom that never stops, an endless tapestry, because every time it almost finishes, some new imperfection is found and the unraveling process begins again. This has a name even if it doesn't seem like it yet. Perfectionism is often just a fear of finishing, because while the tapestry is incomplete, it can still be fixed. Once finished, exposed, it becomes permanent, and permanent, for Virgo, is synonymous with exposure. But notice, the threads you try hardest to hide are precisely the ones that create the relief, the texture, the irregular sheen that makes a fabric seem alive. A rug made only of straight, perfect lines tells no story. It's smooth, it's cold, it's forgettable. Yours, full of visible corrections, of knots that insisted on appearing, is the only one that no one else in the world could have woven exactly the way you did. If the wrong thread has always been the most valuable part of the fabric, then perhaps the problem was never you. Perhaps it was the idea that there's a right way to weave an entire life without any visible flaws, without any crooked knots that tell the story of how many times you've started over. This is precisely the turning point that the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose helps you navigate. Stop undoing your own design just because it didn't turn out symmetrical. The material will be taken down soon. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There is yet another layer, deeper than all the others, and it has to do with bees. Not the bees flying freely around the garden. The bees inside the hive, those that work in absolute silence, producing something sweet from flower stings that no one else notices. A virgin bee is one that builds the perfect honeycomb, cell by cell, hexagon by hexagon, without ever stopping to taste its own honey. Have you ever noticed this? You know how to take care of everyone. You know how to produce. You know how to organize the entire hive by yourself if necessary. But when it comes time to stop and savor what you yourself have built, something stops you. Maybe it's the fear of discovering that it's not as sweet as it should be. Maybe it's the habit of always working on the next honeycomb without ever closing the cycle of the previous one. And the most curious thing is that a beehive only collapses when the worker bees are exhausted, trying to feed everyone but themselves. It's a silent, almost invisible pattern until the day production simply stops. There's no warning, no drama, just a void where there was once constant buzzing. Do you feel that tiredness? That kind of tiredness that isn't physical, the kind you feel inside, working too hard to keep everything sweet for others while keeping your own honeycomb intact, waiting for a day that might never come to finally taste what you've produced. It is precisely at this point of silent exhaustion that the scene truly begins to take shape, because the universe chose the moment you least expected it, the moment when you had already given up on tasting your own honey, to show you that it was always sweet, it was always ready. The only thing missing was for you to stop working for a second and taste it. There's a role within the beehive called the guard bee. It stays at the entrance, checking each returning bee, smelling, identifying, deciding who can enter and who represents a threat. You know this role well because you perform it on yourself all the time. Every new idea, every new feeling, every possibility of rest needs to pass through your internal guard before being accepted. And your guard is rigorous. It asks, is this safe? Is this productive? Does this deserve my time? And when in doubt, it denies entry. The problem is that this same guard, trained to protect the hive from real threats, has started to block good things as well. Rest seems like a threat. Praise seems like a threat. Someone saying you've done enough sounds like an invitation to lower your guard at a dangerous time. So you politely refuse, smile, and go back to work because it seems safer to keep producing than to risk stopping and discovering that maybe you no longer know what to do with the silence. But every healthy beehive has resting seasons, periods when production intentionally decreases so that the honey doesn't run out, so that the bees survive the winter. This isn't laziness, it's survival engineering, tested for millions of years. And perhaps the scene that's reaching you is exactly that, the permission finally accepted to enter a resting period without feeling guilty about it. A bee that never tastes its own honey is still responsible for sustaining the entire hive, but it also deserves to stop one day and savor what it has built with its own hands. You deserve that too, even if no one has ever told you so before. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose was written for Virgos, exhausted from producing sweetness for others without ever serving themselves. It teaches you to close the cycle, to taste the honeycomb before building the next one. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There is a natural, almost invisible process that occurs in saltwater lagoons when the sun shines on the same spot for long enough. The water evaporates slowly, without haste, and what remains at the bottom is not residue. It is crystal. Salt formed in almost geometric, transparent structures that shine precisely because everything that was liquid, everything that was unstable, had time to settle. That's who you are, Virgo. That's who you've always been. Not the kind of person who needs to rush to prove their worth, nor the kind who needs to hide the process until it's presentable. You are the water that accepted to evaporate slowly under its own sun until it became something solid, brilliant, impossible to imitate. Notice something curious about salt. It only crystallizes when the water stops moving. While it's agitated, turbulent, trying to reach every corner of the pond, nothing forms. It's only in stillness, in apparent stagnation, that structure begins to appear. And perhaps that's what you've most resisted accepting about yourself, that your periods of pause were never wasted. They were exactly the time life needed to transform everything you've experienced into something solid. The sundial that measured shadows on cloudy days, the camera obscura that revealed images in its own time, The bonsai tree pruned with such care, the wine cellar that knew how to wait for each barrel, the telescope that finally turned inward, the loom that learned to live with the crooked thread, the beehive that discovered that resting is also producing. All of this was not a path of errors. It was the exact process of crystallization that brought you here. You don't need to understand everything right now. You just need to know that at some point soon, something will fall into place before your eyes in such a clear way that you will recognize, without a doubt, that you've always been on the right path. And when that happens, it will seem obvious. It will seem like it's always been this way, because deep down, it always has been. And when that scene finally arrives, you won't need any more proof. The salt will already be formed, the light will already be visible, and you, for the first time in a long time, will simply recognize your own beauty without needing to analyze every angle of it before believing it's real.